Despite some wobbly portions towards the end of They Cloned Tyrone, this movie was a crazy, hilarious ride all the way through. Okay, guys, I first found out about this movie, They Cloned Tyrone, when I watched a trailer reaction that D-Movie Man had done, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe. I don't know, whatever. It was a while back. He did this trailer reaction, and during that video, he talked about how he had actually seen this movie back in 2021. He saw a really advanced, like a really early screening. It wasn't completely done. I've seen movies like that before, so I know exactly what he's talking about. What I'm curious to know, D, when you get around to posting a video for it, is how much this changed, how much the final product changed from the initial screening that you had. Really, really curious to know, because I have firsthand experience with significant changes being made to a film based on input that is received by the screening audience. So anyway, okay, I digress. They Cloned Tyrone. Oh, this movie. So I saw it was, it's coming out this Friday. As of the recording of this is this Tuesday. It's coming out this Friday, the 21st on Netflix. That's probably when this review will go up. So this movie, oh my gosh. The synopsis is these people in this town, I can't remember the name of the town now, doggone. Anyway, there's this people in like this, a rundown type of town, you know, like drugs being dealt, prostitutes, pimps, and all that. And three of the inhabitants of the, Glen. Three of the inhabitants of this place start to notice some weird stuff is happening. The main character, Fontaine, played by John Boyega, and they do some digging and they find out that there is some extensive stuff that's happening. Deep things that are going on that the townspeople don't know about, and they find out that there's something bigger at play than they ever could have expected. I'm trying to word this in such a way that doesn't give away too much. So that's the premise. And right off the bat, I'm going to say that the main reason this story works so well is the performance of the three main actors, John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, and Teyonah Parris. She's the chick who played in, oh my gosh, WandaVision. Whew. Anyway, she also played in Candyman. Well, there's that movie. Their chemistry is so good and it feels so authentic. And from what I understand, there was quite a bit of ad-libbing in the movie, according to like the producer or the director or something. I'm curious to know what was ad-libbed. Like if they, now this is coming to Netflix, so I don't know if they'll ever, there probably won't ever be a physical sort of copy of this with, let's say, director's commentary. I would love to hear director's commentary on this. I love that sort of thing. I love the behind the scenes stuff. And I would really like to know what stuff was ad-libbed and what stuff was true to the script. I guess I could find a copy of the screenplay and then I would know maybe, but whatever. I digress again. The comedy in here, I feel like this movie is going to take multiple watches in order to pick up on all of the hilarious lines of dialogue that were said. I caught much of it, but I know there was a lot I missed because a lot of stuff that was said was like something would be happening and you're focusing on like maybe the main person in the scene or whatever the camera's, paying the most attention to, but you've got conversation happening in the background that is really funny. There were several laugh out loud moments in here, and Jamie Foxx for me was the standout. Now, they all did great. They did fantastic. And John Boyega, his work with the American dialect is absolutely, I mean, like, you would never know this dude is not American. He has this nailed. And while a lot of Brits can come over here to the US and they can very effectively mimic our accent, our dialect, not all of them can do a good job. I was watching an episode of Battlestar Galactica yesterday, and one of the characters, he's supposed to be playing someone with an American dialect, but he said one word, and I knew right away this dude's not American. So they can't all convincingly pull it off. And some people try so hard to pull it off that it becomes obvious they're not American. Benedict Cumberbatch is an example. I noticed right away in Doctor Strange how hard he was trying to correctly enunciate the way we talk here in the United States, that it became very apparent that he was trying really like it. So that's another tell. But John Boyega he just slid so naturally into the way his character talked. I was super, super impressed. Now, I knew he could do it already, but he really hit it home in this movie. Jamie Foxx, comedic timing, comedic dialogue. Oh my gosh, he was so funny in here. So funny. And Teyonah Parris, she was really, really funny in here too. Some of the stuff that she would talk about, and like at one point they're in her room. This isn't a huge spoiler, but at one point they're in her room, like at her grandma's house or something. And she's a Nancy Drew fan, and I could totally relate to her because when I was a kid, I just gobbled up Nancy Drew books. Like, because I had no TV, books were my source of main entertainment when I was a kid. And I loved Nancy Drew. And so she had this whole collection of all these Nancy Drew books. And one of the characters made a funny quip about like, how many adventures has this bitch been on or something like that. It was so funny. Anyway, so she would talk about Nancy Drew and the stuff about detecting and all this. So that was funny. And also the director was talking about these characters, well, like how he conceived of, or the idea for this story. And he was telling a personal tale about interactions with a friend of his and how he'd gone through some hard times and stuff. And they sort of concocted this idea about a bootleg Scooby-Doo sort of story with these misfit detectives. They just kind of fall into this detective-y role, and they're just not on the outside. They're not suited for that, but they do a really good job as the story goes on. And you see how capable they really are at figuring things out and coming up with solutions and stuff like that. So I liked these three different funny characters. Like John Boyega is a drug dealer, Teyonah Parris is a prostitute, Jamie Foxx is her pimp. And how, despite these differences in the way they are as a person, how they're able to work really well together to figure out this thing that's happening in their town. So that was really well done. I liked that. I also liked how I watched a review that someone had done for this movie, and he was talking about how the director took every conceivable Black stereotype and that could be perceived as a negative and flipped it on its head. Well, specifically things like particular foods eaten, products used in hair or on hair, drinks consumed, stuff like that. And when he said that, and I was thinking also as I was watching this movie that, because I was noticing some of these stereotypes. And when he mentioned that, it reminded me of the tackling of stereotypes in the movie The Blackening, the recent comedy movie. And I just thought that was interesting. And I felt like both of these movies did a really good job at effectively tackling these stereotypes and exploring like the comedic aspect to it all, but also turning them, in the case of this movie, turning it into what could be considered a positive. Hold on a minute. Some other stuff that I liked about this movie, or some observations that I wanted to make. Well, the director, hasn't done very much directing. I don't know if this is like his first like full directorial debut, but he's a writer, and he apparently wrote Creed 2. He also wrote this in collaboration with another person. This guy looks so young, so young. How old is he? I was just impressed by how young he looked. But of course, the older I get, the younger everybody else starts looking. Anyway, whatever. So what else? The way this movie looked. So I wrote down what this movie was described as being, and this comes directly from. It's described as being a science fiction comedy mystery conceived as a genre-busting homage to the blaxploitation films of the 1970s. And when I was watching this movie and when it started, I was wondering, because it had been a bit since I'd seen the trailer, I was wondering, when is this movie supposed to take place? Because things look old and they look run down and the cars aren't new and modern. They look like cars from the 70s. The way the people dress, the way the movie looked, like the grain of the film, or like the texture, it was grainy. Even the font here, it looked like a movie from the 70s. And so I thought it was supposed to be the 70s until a character, oh no, this is what clued me into the fact that it wasn't. One of the characters, a little kid, mentioned Squidward. And I thought, did he say Squidward? And then it was repeated. And then later, one of the characters pulled out a flip cell phone. So I was like, oh, okay, they're just giving this movie that feel. This definitely had the feel. The score as well also gave it that feel. So that was interesting. I liked how that was done. Cinematography was also great. As I've already mentioned, the acting was just, it was so good. No cons at all in that department. And like I said, very impressed by his performance. Kiefer Sutherland was in here. There is a scene where, and of course Kiefer is great in pretty much everything. There's a scene where he wields a certain weapon. It was done in such a cool way. And it reminded me a bit of Jack Bauer. He's no Jack Bauer in here, but him being badass the way he was in that particular scene reminded me of Jack Bauer. So that was cool to see him in here. What else? Oh, I've already kind of touched on it, like the costume, the way it looked. Like I said, it made me think that it was a movie from back in the day. But I liked it. I liked the way the hair was done. I liked the costumes that were worn, the makeup. So yeah, it's very atmospheric. It's got that feel. You would never know this is supposed to take place in modern day if they didn't specifically use certain things that only exist in modern day. So it was interesting. It was like this strange conflict between when you knew it took place and what it looked like, but it worked. I mean, there was no real issue with that at all for me. Something else that I wanted to mention about these characters. So the director said that the characters that these three actors played, he said that the tone of this film and these characters is 100% reliant on how these actors grounded the characters, because the movie starts off with them being caricatures, the pimp, the drug dealer, the prostitute, that sort of thing. But as the movie goes on and you get to know the characters more and more, you start to see that there are all these layers to them. They're not just these superficial type of caricatures that you expect them to be. John Boyega has a certain tenderness and warmth to him when it comes to like this little kid that he's friends of. He doesn't show that very often. He's very, very serious in here. Like Jamie Foxx and Teyonah Parris, they provide the comedy. John Boyega is not very comedic in here. He's like the more super serious, just very like don't get on his bad side type of character. And I liked how you started to pick up on different aspects to these characters. So he has this tender side to him when it comes to, like, let's say his mother, this young kid that he's friends with. And then Jamie Foxx, he also shows a layer of depth beyond just, he's this pimp. And Teyonah Parris, she also demonstrates that she's a character that's much more than just a prostitute. She has higher aspirations. She doesn't want to continue to be this type of person. She's very smart. She has these different aspects to her that are so much more than what she is on the surface. And so these guys did a really good job of bringing that to life on the screen and making you get to where you really cared for them. I can't say enough good things about the way they played their parts. I'm going to slide a little bit into things that could be considered con-ish territory. One of them has to do with something that a character did, and I was like, what? That makes no sense to me. So maybe I'm missing something. There's a character. And it was kind of comedic when this happened. So Jamie Foxx is trying to talk to this character, and he calls her this term, and she didn't like it at all. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, it's just kind of reflex. It just came out. That was kind of funny how he said that. And so then they talk a little bit more, and then she turns around and calls him that exact same term that she didn't like for him to call her. So I didn't, like, what? I didn't get, that made no sense to me. It would have made sense to me if just she never talked to him that way, but she didn't. She turned around and did the same thing. It was like, I don't know. So that aggravated me about her particular character. But that was just like something that makes no sense. I don't get this. What's going on? Are you just trying to show she's a hypocrite? Or did the writers not realize and the director not realize that that made no sense, what she did? Whatever. That's minor. That's really not a huge deal. Another thing that's kind of like a con, as I mentioned in my opening, was it gets a bit wobbly for me in the latter part of the second act and also some portions in the third act. The reasoning behind what is really going on, and I'm choosing my words carefully, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I got the supposed intent of what was happening, but the execution of it still didn't make sense to me because it just seemed like it had all these holes in the whole idea of what was happening. And also the reasoning of one of the main characters that is involved in what's going on made no sense to me either, because their supposed solution to a certain thing was to do this other certain thing that made no sense to me either. I mean, it felt pretty thin. Like it felt like it didn't have much substance to it. I thought, oh, okay, we're going to get some real understanding here. And when things were revealed, I was like, well, that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. That didn't seem like it was fleshed out as well as I think maybe it could have been. That's why it ended up as a con for me. Also, I feel like that the director made some sort of comment in multiple interviews how, he wanted this film to be, it tackles dark subject matter and it touches on things, not specifically with regard to what's actually happening here, but themes that we know are true because we know of certain entities that have been involved in certain things. Jeez. And so while that part of it, where the story was coming from as far as that aspect of it, but the director said that he didn't want to come across, he's tackling this darker subject matter with a lot of humor. And he said he didn't want to come across as preachy. And it doesn't really, but in a way it kind of does subliminally. And I can't get really specific because if I do, then it might give away too much. And I can't talk about this with anybody at the moment to sort of bounce ideas off and, maybe sort of get my brain wrapped a bit more around the story. And maybe if there was something that I missed while I was watching it, but it's nothing that's hugely overt, but in some ways it kind of is. I know that probably makes no sense at all. But anyway, some of it felt a little divisive, but it's certainly not to the point that the film was a turnoff. And I enjoyed the entire journey from beginning to end. It starts off much darker than it feels like it ended up being. Like it started off pretty dark because it shows a day in his life, Fontaine's life. And this part actually belonged in the pro category, but it shows like his life this particular day. So the tone of this film, it feels like it changes a bit. But something that I did appreciate about a certain way that they filmed this thing that happened to him, it was interesting. It was shot only from the inside, well, mostly from the inside of the vehicle where he was. So he's in the vehicle, some stuff is getting ready to happen. It does not show the stuff outside. And some things are going on or something's going to happen because what's up, but it never shows the activity outside his vehicle. The camera's like focused on him and it's showing him and it shows him make a move, and yet the camera is still only focused on the inside of the vehicle. And I felt like that was a pretty interesting way to film it. They could have filmed it in the typical way, show the stuff outside, show him in the car, show the stuff outside again, show him. No, and it just like maintained itself inside the vehicle for much of that scene. And I felt like that was very effective way to shoot that particular stuff that was happening. That was something that I had written down, like I said, in the pro category, and I completely forgot to mention it. But anyway, the reason I tied back around to it just now was because that was the darker part of the story. So like it starts off, it's dark. He's this drug guy, and there's like people he's at odds with, and so they're going to come after him, and it's like, okay, wow. And then when it picks up again with him, and then he starts to notice that things aren't right, and then the pimp guy and the prostitute girl, they're noticing stuff too. He sees this thing happen and he doesn't understand. He starts to just wonder, and he goes and investigates further. And as that goes on, while there's still this very serious underlying theme of what's happening, it felt like after this intro part, the stuff that occurred after that felt so much more comedic. There were moments of comedy before, especially when he was interacting with Jamie Foxx's character, but it felt like it was more comedy heavy after, like, let's say the first portion of the intro act and onward. So in some ways, it felt like there was a bit of a slight tonal shift that I noticed from the beginning to where it ended up once everything was done. It didn't detract. This is not anything in the con category, but like I said, it's tying back around to that particular scene. So the point of the title, you don't find that out until the very, very end. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But that scene is still a little confusing to me because I don't understand why this person all the way over here, like what, I can't say anything specifically, so you guys won't know maybe what I'm talking about until you see it. But anyway, the point of this long-ass rambling review is to say that this movie was a lot of fun. I highly recommend it if you like genre-bending types of movies, especially if you like comedy mixed with some action, sort of thriller, mystery stuff. You'll probably appreciate something like this. I certainly did. I was very glad I was able to see it on the big screen. It's having a very limited release run right now before it comes to Netflix this Friday. I think that's a mistake. I don't know why Netflix does this, why they only, like, they have this production with these well-known names and they put it in theaters for like a week, maybe not even. It was only playing at one theater in my area, so that's why I went. It was a last-minute decision to go see it today, and I'm glad I was able to experience it on the big screen. Anyway, it was fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it when or if you get around to watching it. But whenever you do, let me know what you thought about it. Curious to talk about it with people, because I can't right now. Okay, you guys, I think that is it. I am going to wrap this up for now, and we'll see you guys later.